Welcome back, everyone. It's great to see you again, and you're seeing me in a slightly different way this week because I'm sharing my screen to show you this report that has finally been published. We've been working on it for, probably 2 years now. Okay, let me take you back. If you are new here, my name is Harriet Farlow. I go by Harriet Hacks online. I say that I missed the boat in computer hacking, so now I hack AI instead. What that looks like is that I own an AI security company based in Australia, also operating in the UK. We mostly do training work through the AI Security Fundamentals course, a bit of advisory and a bit of research. So this is some of that research. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, I started working in AI security because in my national security job at the time, AI was obviously a pretty big focus, and because I was also doing my PhD in this field called adversarial machine learning, which was all about different, mostly theoretical ways of disrupting, deceiving, or disclosing sensitive information from machine learning models. And a big problem, I guess, with this entire field was that it was seen as very theoretical. These were often like statistics-based approaches that, disrupt the internal properties of machine learning models, either by changing those internals or by giving them some kind of input that makes them essentially not work. But they were never really seen as a valid threat. And over the few years since I was doing my PhD, AI security as a field has become a lot more significant, but a couple of years ago, I really wanted to understand the prevalence of AI security incidents in the wild. And by AI security, I mean that they're specifically incidents where some sort of external attacker, like a human or an AI hacker, is actually trying to attack the AI model itself, rather than AI doing something bad. So we've seen a lot of examples of AI safety incidents in the wild, where AI is doing the wrong thing basically, or cybersecurity problems that happen to be in AI products. But I really wanted to understand if there was something inherently different about artificial intelligence systems and specifically their security that we could learn about and ideally help us inform risk management. I guess the whole point of this exercise was, at the start to do some kind of modeling piece around, depending on the kind of product you have, the kind of technology it relies on, so like what kind of machine learning algorithms essentially, then what kinds of risks are you more likely to be exposed to? And so that's what led to the submission of this project. And it was very generously funded by Foresight Institute, which is fantastic. And it was led by my company, Maleva Security Labs, but also in collaboration with the Australian National University and the University of New South Wales. So the report is now available to download on aisecurityfundamentals.com/research. But I'm going to give a brief walkthrough of what we found. And the intention of this really is that if you have any additional questions or comments about how to make sure that this report is most useful for you, I really hope this is somewhere where you can, in the comments of whatever platform you're watching this on, probably YouTube, that you can submit those comments and then I can sort of dig into some of the data or some of our findings from this project. It was about a year long. It's taken a while to write it up. So let me take you through it. Essentially, there were 3 parts to this research. It started with this very broad overview of wanting to estimate AI security incident likelihood, but there's essentially 3 different core pieces to this work. We did some vulnerability analysis of almost 90,000 CVEs, which are software vulnerabilities from the NVD database. These were cyber-specific vulnerabilities. We then looked at AI-specific incidents. So we looked at different AI incident databases and basically tried to understand whether they were safety incidents or security incidents. And then we had a deep dive into that subset of AI security cases. And then thirdly, because I guess the whole point of this exercise was to understand how it informs risk management, we compared 5 big, popular AI risk management frameworks: the European Union AI Act, the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, Microsoft's Secure AI Guidelines, ISO IEC 42001, 42005 hadn't been released at this time, and the NCSC Secure AI Guidelines. The point of that framework analysis was essentially to understand how adequately they address security-specific risks. So whether they had specific consideration for the ways that AI systems might be novel and therefore how we secure that. And we introduced a score called the Normalized Coverage Depth Score to do that analysis. So let me take you through a few key concepts first of all. So for part one, a CVE refers to a common vulnerabilities and exposures. It's basically the global standard for tracking vulnerabilities. Each CVE includes an ID, a description, sometimes severity, which is linked to CVSS, which is their vulnerability scoring system. We now have an specific AI VSS, but that also came out after we'd already done this research. And CVEs are used by SOC teams, so operation centers, vulnerability management folk, and for patching pipelines. And they're all stored in the NVD, which is the National Vulnerability Database. And this basically adds structured metadata as well, also includes some severity scoring, and there's some categorization. So let's dive into the first part of this research. So this is where we were looking at these CVEs. So essentially, one of our amazing researchers, Delia, she built a model that we fine-tuned to be able to understand the difference between AI-specific vulnerabilities or AI security-specific vulnerabilities and traditional cybersecurity vulnerabilities. We provide more about how this model was built in some of the academic papers. If you're interested, I'll definitely share that. But essentially, we broke the kinds of incidents or vulnerabilities that were listed in that database down into AI security. So that's what we're interested in. So, for example, a prompt injection is an example of an AI security attack, but also there are dozens of other kinds of AI security incidents that are listed in taxonomies by NIST, for instance, like a model evasion attack, where you evade classification by a model, is also an example of an AI security attack. Just as is data poisoning, where you add poisoned data to a data set that a machine learning model is trained on, and therefore the machine learning model doesn't work as intended. They're examples of AI security incidents. An AI supply chain vulnerability is kind of different. That's where basically the problem is because of an integration issue of an AI component. It's not necessarily something to do with the AI part of that component. It's just that tool was improperly configured and it led to some kind of vulnerability. There's also what we refer to as AI IT cybersecurity, to put it in short terms that we can use here, but really that refers to a traditional cybersecurity vulnerability in an AI product. So it's not actually related to the fact that that AI product uses models and the kinds of implications about them being, probabilistic, being very dependent on the training data. It's really just a garden variety cybersecurity vulnerability, but it happens to be at the system level of some sort of AI product. So again, that's different. We also just have these traditional cybersecurity vulnerabilities in cyber and information products. So as we can see from this graph, cybersecurity vulnerabilities vastly outnumber the others, to be expected in a way. Like, this is the NVD database, and then narrowly followed by or narrowly AI supply chain, AI IT cybersecurity, and then AI security. So there were not many vulnerabilities that we're able to label as AI security vulnerabilities in here. The question then is, do AI vulnerabilities exist? Yes, we know they do. We've seen reports. We know that in theory they do exist. But why they're not showing up here? Is it because people don't think to submit them to the NVD? Is it because they're not being tagged or categorized properly? Why is it that they're not appearing here? Are they appearing elsewhere? That led us to doing the next part of this research, which was essentially off the back of this finding that, AI security risk might be hidden inside traditional cyber data. We wanted to go take a look at some AI-specific incident repositories and see if AI security incidents were there and how they might be handled. So that led us to part 2 of our research. We were looking specifically at AI incidents. We went to a bunch of different repositories. The AIAAIC, try and say that very fast, where there's almost 2,000 AI incidents. We went to the AIID, there's about 1,000, the AIVD, which is a new AI-specific vulnerability database, and at the time of doing this research, there currently weren't that many in there. And then MITRE Atlas, where they list incidents as well. And we categorize them by the taxonomy used by the NIST AI risk management framework. If you're interested in looking at what those are, I'll provide some links to that. I don't want to dive in too deep here, but essentially they categorize them as black box evasion attacks. So an evasion attack where the attacker has no information about the model or its internals. And there's a direct prompt injection, so where someone is literally submitting a prompt injection to a chatbot, as opposed to an indirect prompt injection down here, which is where it might be hidden in some kind of context or document that is then absorbed, read by the model. A generative AI-based attack, white box evasion, model extraction, AI supply chain that's similar to how we classified it earlier, some sort of malicious executable, model poisoning. And then at the top, I haven't mentioned this yet because it doesn't quite fall under AI-specific vulnerabilities, but we still included cyber vulnerabilities because there were quite a lot of cyber incidents, even here in these AI-specific databases that weren't necessarily because of weaknesses in AI products. So what we can see here is that the vast majority of attack types observed are black box evasion. So that's when an attacker is trying to evade some sort of classification. The thing we will call out here that's really important is that this is 96 cases. So of the thousands of incidents that were across these AI incidents, only 96 of them were AI security specific. And this analysis was done by our fearless researcher, Tanya, who was able to comb through them and identify and tag them. And she provided a really rich set of metadata as well, which we'll open source about the kinds of incidents, how they were found, to the extent we can based on the public information that's available about them, what was done, specifically why they worked. But these black box evasion attacks were by far the most common. And then direct prompt injection. But for the most part, a lot of the incidents in there that were AI specific, we would still classify as those cyber incidents based on our previous definition. Something that we also think is quite important to highlight is how these incidents ended up in these repositories. And it wasn't necessarily because academics or researchers or practitioners were submitting them, but it's from news reports a lot of the time. And most of the time, these were also automatic imports of AI-related reports to the database. It wasn't always where someone was applying human-level review to understand what they were and what kind of metadata should be added with them. And that meant that the information about these AI incidents was usually not at all very rich, which is quite challenging. So 4 key highlights from this part 2. First of all, clearly AI security and AI incidents are occurring. It's just that many were labeled as misuse, safety, general cybersecurity incidents. It was very hard to distinguish between an AI failure and an AI attack. Second of all, there was quite a lot of bias in terms of the kind of information we saw, because they were mostly from news, blogs, and public reporting. This means that this data set is likely to be skewed. It's overrepresented with high-profile visible incidents, which means that underrepresented are the technical low visibility attacks. And this really means that visibility is not the same as frequency. Third, known risks really dominate. So most incidents are not advanced adversarial machine learning techniques. They're instead traditional, cyber and data related problems like privilege escalation, data exposure, misconfiguration, insecure integrations. And even the AI specific attacks were a lot simpler than expected. A lot of the time there was some sort of configuration error. Fourthly, sorry, I just had to pause for a second because an ice cream truck is driving down my street. I love that in this day and age. Okay, so the fourth important point is that AI does amplify traditional risks. So AI introduces unpredictable inputs, probabilistic outputs, low interpretability, and dependency on upstream data and models. And this means that traditional risks becomes much harder to detect, more scalable, and high impact. So let's move on to part 3, the framework analysis. How well do frameworks cover cybersecurity? This was quite quite a big piece of work because we essentially took all of the different kinds of failure modes for AI systems based on the NIST taxonomy. We mapped them to different attacks. We then cross-referenced that with the controls and then linked those to mitigations that could be included. Again, I'll go a bit deeper into that methodology, but it essentially meant that there were tens of thousands of rows that were like cross-mapping all of those different things, especially because the NIST AI RMF and the EU AI Act have hundreds of different controls that they recommend, so around sort of the 200 mark, as we can see over here. This is their CDS score, but they do have, like, NIST has something like 170 different controls it recommends, and the EU AI Act is similar. So what this is telling us essentially is that for all of the different AI security, not just AI, but AI security specific risks and potential incidents, the NIST AI RMF does actually cover all of them. It means that they have controls that are going to essentially reduce the risk that those kinds of incidents are going to happen in a meaningful way. Doesn't necessarily mean they explain how to do that. So the challenge with these frameworks, and again, I will clarify, these are different kinds of frameworks. Like the NIST AI RMF is not strictly mandatory, but if you want to work with certain providers or certain government organizations, then you do have to show adherence to it. The EU AI Act, of course, is law, so that's different. Microsoft NCSC guidelines, they're useful, but not necessarily required, although the NCSC guidelines are recommended for government organizations, and then ISO EC 40001 is a standard. So again, they're all different. The point of this is to show, of all the different specific instruments that you could use to manage the risk of AI in your systems, which ones are the best performing. And the NIST AI RMF was definitely the strongest. Again, we'll highlight that it doesn't mean that they actually tell you how to do it. Operationalizing these controls is much harder. That's a lot of the work that we end up doing. But this at least does tell you a good place to start. So what does this tell us across the board? We have a few specific recommendations. First of all, honestly, I started this project thinking that I could just build a model to help us predict based on a few inputs, like what kind of tool I use, what kind of use cases I have, what's my regulatory environment, that it'd be able to kind of spit out some recommendations, or at least like a likelihood score for different kinds of AI incidents. And that was definitely not what we found. The reason for that was mostly because there wasn't really a lot of data to inform our decision making. AI security falls in the strange gap between cybersecurity processes and reporting, and AI land, which is still quite safety-centric. It's really led by development from frontier models, usually people who work in AI development and machine learning, engineering and model building, data science. They usually don't really interact with cybersecurity teams. They're very different disciplines. So AI security kind of gets caught in this gap. But now that AI security risks are growing, these are the kinds of recommendations that we suggest to help change this. So first of all, being able to standardize these definitions and reporting, making sure that AI security incidents have somewhere to go. Secondly, integrating AI vulnerabilities into cybersecurity processes. This is definitely starting to happen now, but there needs to be a lot more of this in organizations and more guidance to help organizations do this. Thirdly, we saw so many different vulnerabilities because of AI supply chain, so assuring this is really important. And then lastly, what helps all of this? Obviously, collaboration. It sounds obvious, but in practice, we have seen it, but it's still quite limited because of, I guess, maybe the incentives of different parties across government, academia, and industry, especially in the AI world. But when it comes to security, we all need to work together because the potential for AI risks to be way more impactful because of the scale, the autonomy of AI systems, the amount of access they have, and the enormous integration into enterprises already means that's really important. This obviously means that there can be some work in improving AI risk management frameworks, specifically a bit more about the advice they give around how to do it. There could be some collaboration with industry there, because often it's organizations working with big third-party providers like Microsoft and AWS, and they are quite helpful, but being able to sort of make that link would be more useful. And then, of course, education. Like, there's a reason that I focus on training. We've been in projects before where we hand over some sort of artifact, but the team doesn't necessarily know what to do with it, because they are also, trained specifically, usually in cybersecurity, or they're AI people, but usually AI security, the people charged with AI security either don't know about one of those fields. And so investing in training for the people who are going to do the AI security thing is so important, but even for leadership to make sure they understand what's happening there. And then, of course, continuous reassessment. It doesn't end. So a big thank you to everyone who was involved. This was a pretty big piece of work, and some of it has been published in academic proceedings. This report specifically is intended to be the kind of report where, if you're a cyber practitioner with some interest in AI security, or a leader, or someone at that intersection, you don't necessarily need to be an expert in either of them. This is practical, it's tight, it's specific, but I'm really keen to maybe write some blogs that deep dive into specific, so what's from this. So feel free to let me know what would be specifically useful for you, because we have a lot of data, we have a lot of insights. I specifically led the work on the risk management framework, the risk management frameworks, sorry. So I know a lot about all of the controls that they each have, and how they word it and what they imply. So that's something that I find quite interesting. It's not the sexiest topic, like risk management frameworks, but I think I find it really interesting because a lot of the work I do in practice is helping teams operationalize it, and reading between the lines and nuance, and being able to blend insights from all of them together. Like, even though the NIST AI RMF is definitely the most comprehensive, my personal favorite is the NCSC Secure AI Guidelines, because it's really, like, it's shorter, but it really covers a lot of ground for AI security specific stuff in that short document. It really packs a punch. It's very, very good. So please do let me know what would be useful. Please do follow up, ask any questions, and thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. If you found this useful in any way, please do like and subscribe. It always feels so weird to say that, but it makes a massive, massive difference, especially because this kind of research wasn't necessarily done for us. It was to put into the outside world, and to make sure that people can benefit from, I guess, gaps that I see in the landscape. So please do engage, and I'll see you next time.